Hello, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp. I'm super excited to be doing another live episode. We just got back from vacation, and one of the things that happened to us is one of our cards was compromised while we were on the trip. Luckily, we had multiple cards, so there's no issues. We didn't run out of funds or way to access funds while we were on our trip, but it did prompt me to think of this great topic to cover because we've actually had our cards compromised multiple times over the last year or so, and I know I'm not the only ones. I know I have clients out there, so we're going to talk about a few ways to guard your details, kind of protect your credit card information and other resources to make sure that if you so that you can avoid all of these kind of messes. It's super stressful when your card gets compromised. You have to deal with a bunch of stuff that we'll tackle. And one of the big things that I kind of found out as I was kind of looking into this a little bit more to look at some of the stats is credit card fraud is on the rise. Like I said, multiple times our cards have been impacted just in the last year. And that's after having no issues for multiple years. And so there's a stat out there that right now for 2022, it's estimated that credit card fraud and debit card fraud, when combined, actually is going to account to $34.4 billion in losses for credit card and debit card transactions that were used fraudulently. So that's a huge number. That's a lot of money. And if we compare that to 2012, still a large number, but it was only 11.3 billion then. And so lots of growth in just people taking your credit card information, using it fraudulently. And let's talk about a few ways we can avoid some of that because, like I said, super stressful. But there's actually more than one way that people can try to get your credit card information or try to do credit card fraud against you. And it's crazy that there's so many things, but one of them that you probably have seen, we've seen it. My wife will get texts, I'll get texts, and we're like, hey, is this something that you're doing? We have to kind of check with each other, make sure we don't accidentally confirm stuff because this form of attack is called a phishing attack. They'll send you either emails or now text messages with links saying, hey, we're your credit card company, or hey, we're Amazon. Did you review this order? And there's all different types of things where they try to make it look legit. And a lot of times they are using companies that sound familiar. So Amazon, good probability that someone's using Amazon. So it's like, oh yeah, I use Amazon. That must be for this thing that I just purchased. And there's other things like DocuSigns. DocuSigns a popular way to collect information and have digital signatures sent around. So that's another popular one I've seen. I know our credit card has been one where they straight copy, they make a copy of the website basically. And so it looks like you would be logging into a credit card website and things like that. And they're going to ask you for all of your critical details, right? They're going to ask for your social, they'll ask for your credit card number, the numbers on the back of your credit card, the expiration date. So that's called a phishing attack. When they're sending you stuff to fish for information from you, and it's very lucrative. They catch a lot of people that way. And again, they're getting smart. They know the types of companies and the way to word these things to kind of get you. And luckily, we've avoided those ones. I'm pretty sure. I don't think that's what caused ours. I'll give you a hint here in a second as far as what I think got us in the past. So another one is data breaches. So it seems like every quarter, at least, you hear about some new data breach, some hack that happened, and information was taken. And that's very popular way of it impacts so many people. So if there's a company with millions of informations, millions, billions of credit cards on their files, and they have a data breach, well, their stuff could be compromised that way. So that's a big one that impacts a lot of people pretty quickly. Phishing attacks, that's usually one at a time. This one is where I know I got hit, and I know what to look for too. I've worked in banks and credit unions, and we've always had these types of things and issues to worry about. But this was a skimmer that got me. So a skimmer at a gas station, I think, is where it was. It must have looked really good because I didn't see anything looking like it was hanging on or any additional add-on. But a skimmer is where they kind of lay it over somewhere that you're going to run the credit card anyways. And so a lot of times they'll allow your credit card to still run and process how you would expect it to. So at the gas station, still able to get gas. If you're at an ATM, still able to get your money out. But at the same time, they're put stuff over it to collect all that information, any PIN you put in, the zip code you put in, the card information kind of reads the magnets and things like that. So that's one I know for sure got me earlier this year at a gas station. This one here is what caught us at Disney. We're pretty positive because it was a brand new credit card. So this one is not securing your credit card. And it's not like we just threw it out into the road or put it out somewhere in a public place. We're in our hotel room and we realized that, hey, we have more than enough cards and credit card information that we're bringing with us. Between the two of us, we're probably not going to split up. So we left my wife's card at the hotel when previously we had both taken our credit cards. We left it out. It was sitting out, and typically we don't do the room service thing because our kids make a mess of the place, and we don't want someone kind of going through our stuff anyways. We were staying there multiple days, so we figured, yeah, let's get some new towels and all of that stuff happen. And so we said, yep, come do room service. We left your credit card out. We had just activated it 24 hours before that, and the only other place we used it, we physically held it the whole time. And within 30 minutes of us leaving the hotel, when they were going through the rooms and we had talked with the cleaning person, we get a notification from our credit card company saying, hey, did you try making this $160 purchase? And yeah, pretty big coincidence if it wasn't a legitimate kind of way of someone getting it. Because again, that card was activated for less than 24 hours. We've only used it like once physically in our hand. And then the other thing, we just left it out 30 minutes before we got that notification and had room service there. So yeah, that, as you can see, there's quite a few ways that people can get your card information, and some of them are easier than others. Another one that would probably be a little bit trickier, but I have heard it happen to some people, is if these people that are trying to get your information, well, they might not just stop at a credit card. They might get your social security number somehow. They might get your birth date and address. And if they get enough of that, they can actually just create their own credit card, go and open up their own credit card, have it forward to their email address, have it forward to their address. And you might not be aware of these things for quite a while. And so that's probably the scariest one out of all of them, because I'll talk a little bit later why most of these things more of an inconvenience and pain in the butt than it is necessarily scary. But if someone actually is working and using a credit card for a long period of time and causing huge issues that you're not going to find out about for a long time, that's where it gets really scary and harder to kind of unwind those things. So yeah, quite a few ways that people can attack you and get your information. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because they must be using some type of talents or being pretty smart about some of these things in order to do it. But they're not going to go get a real job or do those types of things to kind of earn a living. They're going to steal from other people, unfortunately. But there are ways you can prevent it. There's definitely things we could have done to make sure we avoided those things. And I'll cover a couple of those. And after we ran into that, we were definitely more diligent. We made sure we didn't get any more room service or anyone come to our room to kind of change things over. But also one thing I saw after not really being out in the world during the pandemic too much is almost everywhere has a chip reader. So that's one thing that can be a higher security for you, is not actually feeding your card through anything, but sometimes just tapping your card with a chip, as long as they have that chip reader, saves a lot of security and kind of removes a lot of instances of people grabbing and stealing your information. Another thing that I've been using and loving lately, because it's just so much easier to have it on my phone, is using a virtual card. And this isn't necessarily the Apple Pay or Google Pay. I'll talk about that here in a second. But this is my credit card company. I use Capital One predominantly, creates just a virtual credit card. It's different from my physical card. And I'm able to create those as many as I need, or I can close them and get a new one created really quick if that one's compromised. So that's super nice, because it's easy to get rid of, easy to get replaced, because it all happens online very quickly versus having to wait for a new card to come in the mail, which can be a pain if you only have one card, or you just need that's where your rewards are or something like that. So those are a couple ways. Also, if you're traveling, this isn't necessarily going to prevent anyone from taking your card information, but can definitely avoid any stress if you do end up traveling and you end up having your card compromised. Is have more than one. Have a backup card if you have a significant other, a partner, spouse, whatever. Hopefully they have one for them at least. You have one for you, but it could be multiple credit cards. It could be a debit card and a credit card. You don't want to be out there with a credit card, no cash, and all of a sudden something happens, and most likely your bank isn't going to be located by you. It's just going to be a little bit trickier and cause a big hassle. So this isn't necessarily going to protect your card information, but it will protect your sanity and reduce the stress if you're out traveling. If you only had one card, definitely have a backup there. I mentioned it briefly already, but using Apple Pay or Google Pay, that's another nice way where it's kind of like a virtual card. You save your card information. It's protected and secured by both Google Pay and Apple Pay, depending on what type of phone you have. And that's what I was using a lot too on our trip is, hey, let's just do the Apple Wallet, scan that. And so again, no card being moved around or being able to be picked up by someone else. It does for mine. I have like the face visualization. So that's how it's additionally protected there. Another thing you want to do, just kind of keep on top of things, is review your transactions. If you see something that looks strange, definitely check with your significant other if you share accounts and card information. But yeah, just keep an eye on those things. Every now and then there might be some weird word in that's actually legitimate business. It's just the business has a word name. But most of the time, if you see something that looks strange, it probably is strange. And again, there's constantly people trying to take your information, use your information. So there's a good chance that if you see something that looks funny, it might not be legitimate. So call in about it. They'll have their fraud team work on those things for you and get down to the bottom of it. Never click on unexpected links. So this goes back to that phishing attack that I mentioned. If you get a text saying, hey, this is Capital One, click on this to review a transaction. Even when they're legitimate things from Capital One, I still don't click on them. I'm like, you know what? I have the app on my phone. I'm going to go directly to the app. I'll look at it. I can report the fraud from there. I don't need to be clicking on any links or doing anything like that. But also I've gotten fraudulent ones for the Amazons, the Walmarts, the miscellaneous things where it's like, yeah, that's a common expense that probably most Americans have. And so that's how they're fishing for the information. They're hoping you click on it. They hope that you start giving them information. And sometimes they don't need that much information. If you get halfway through it and stop and like, oh, I just realized this isn't a good thing. If you get through that, you definitely want to go and get your cards canceled and reset, get new cards issued and things like that. Review your free annual credit reports. Like I said, sometimes new accounts can just be opened. And that's really the scariest thing because they can be pretty large dollar amounts at that point. If things are happening without you noticing, it could be multiple accounts. It could be multiple people. These things get sold on the dark web. And it might be various people all kind of dipping their hands into your credit score and impacting your stuff. And another thing you can do is just do a credit freeze. If you know that there's nothing coming up in the near future where you're going to need a credit card, auto loan, or home loan, well, you might not just even want to have the stress or possibility of someone creating accounts without you noticing, and you can just freeze your credit. You'd have to do it at each of the 3 major credit bureaus, but pretty easy to do, very minimal cost. Typically, it's to get those things set up and yeah, just protect yourself that way. So those are a handful of ways that you can kind of prevent all of the ways that these people are going to come after you, try to take your information and try to steal from you, basically. The good news is most of the time with credit cards, especially if someone's using your credit card fraudulently, they get your information, they're charging it. All you have to do is report that information, report it timely. And most credit card companies will say, you know what? You're a good customer. We're just not going to hold you liable to this. We'll reverse these transactions if they can. If not, they swallow those fraudulent charges and they deal with all that. And so that's really good news. It doesn't help completely because there's still a lot of stress. Like, oh man, how'd they get it? And you start thinking through all these things. Like my wife and I were on our vacation. And the good news is just report it. Make sure you find all the transactions and get those knocked out. You'll get a new credit card, and you'll also just want to contact the company, make sure that they know that there's issues. They'll get you a new card coming your way. And the biggest pain in the butt after that is waiting for the card, but then also you have to research the transactions, the legitimate transactions that you do on a regular basis. Because if you've had a card for a long period of time, or you just like using your credit cards for automatic payments for things, a lot of times that you have to go and update all those things. Those companies won't necessarily tell you until it's too like, hey, we tried using your old card and it's not working. So now you got to pay fees, or we're going to turn off your service or something like that. So you want to go find all those recurring payments where you've had your card saved, get those things all updated so you don't have additional grief 30 days later, 45 days later, whenever those payments are going to go to try to process. And so that's all of the fun that you'd have to do to kind of tackle that and take care of any of those issues. thanks for anyone that was on today for the live episode. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around for another couple of seconds to see if anything pops in. But yeah, that's how you can that's how people try to steal your information. That's also how you will be able to prevent these attacks. And if unfortunately something does happen, you know that you can rest easy, because if you're using a credit card, most credit card companies are going to give you $0 of liabilities and expenses. They'll cover those things. One thing I do want to add, though, is if you have a debit card, if you don't like using credit cards for some reason, debit cards do not have as much flexibility. Sometimes those companies will be like, no, you're on the hook for $50, or you're on the hook for $500, or so. I know credit cards tend to be a lot better and nicer at kind of forgiving those fraudulent charges. Debit card companies and banks that issue debit card companies are going to be kind of independent. They have their own stuff where they can make their own decisions on that. So if you use debit cards predominantly, make sure you know what you could be on the hook for, and that could definitely help advise you. If they say, you know what, we do zero liability too, then you're good there. But if they're like, oh yeah, it's $100 or $500, well, with the increase of how much fraudulent charges are occurring on both debit cards and credit cards, do you really want to have that risk of losing $100, $50, whatever it is that they say? You might want to just start transitioning using credit cards mainly if that's their issue and you don't want to change banks. Thanks for joining me today, and I'm excited to bring you new topics as you guys kind of reach out and let me know what's on your mind.